Hello everyone. My name is Elizabeth K. Philip, PGT English from Kendriya Vidyalaya Hebbal, Bangalore region. Today we're going to look into the poem My Mother at 66 written by Kamala Das. Kamala Das was born on 31st March 1934 and died at the age of 75 on 31st May 2009. She is known for originality in her presentations, often reflecting her own experiences through literary pieces both in English and in Malayalam. Now let us read through the poem My Mother at 66. Driving from my parents' home to Cochin last Friday morning, I saw my mother beside me doze, open mouthed, her face ashen like that of a corpse, and realized with pain that she was as old as she looked. But soon put that thought away and looked out at young trees sprinting, the merry children spilling out of their homes. But after the airport security check standing a few yards away, I looked again at her, wan, pale, as a late winter's moon, and felt that old familiar ache, my childhood's fear. But all I said was, "See you soon, Amma." All I did was smile and smile and smile. Let us have a look into the glossary. Doze, meaning to sleep lightly. Ashen, meaning pale. Corpse, meaning dead body. Sprinting, meaning running. Spilling, meaning overflowing. Wan, meaning pale. Ache, meaning pain. When we read through the poem, a few themes are recurring inside the poem. First and the foremost is aging and the inescapable reality of death. Secondly, we come across isolation. And thirdly, we have fear of death and separation. Similarly, along with that, we can find some sub-themes like the mother-daughter relationship, the uneasiness and guilt at leaving an elderly alone. These are also reflected inside the poem. The poem portrays the poet's fear, feelings, concern for her mother as she grapples with the fear of losing her. It becomes her emotional journey as it throws light on her deep connection with the mother and concludes with her coming to terms with the fact that aging and death is a natural process and no one, not even herself, can escape from it. Driving from my parents' home to Cochin last Friday morning, I saw my mother beside me doze open-mouthed, her face ashen like that of a corpse, and realized with pain that she was as old as she looked. Now let's have a look into what it means. The poet is actually on a journey to Cochin Airport from her parents' home one Friday morning. Her mother accompanies her to the airport in the car and she is seated next to her. Mother dozes off during the journey and she is sleeping open-mouthed. Her pale face made her realize that she has aged. She looked her age. She was 66 years old. That posture and the pale face reminded the poet of a corpse, that is, a dead body. But soon put that thought away and looked out at young trees sprinting, the merry children spilling out of their homes. Now these lines clearly indicate that she was trying desperately to come out of those depressing thoughts. To put away those depressing thoughts, she looks out through the window and gets a refreshing sight of young trees moving speedily backwards as a car sped ahead. And she also see the merry children spilling out of their homes, perhaps moving out quickly from the confinement of the closed rooms to the open area to play. These images outside the window were the images of youthfulness, vitality, happiness, and it was creating or forming a stark contrast to the mother who is old, weak, and pale. But after the airport security check, standing a few yards away, I looked again at her, wan, pale, as a late winter's moon, and felt that old familiar ache, my childhood's fear. But all I said was, "See you soon, Amma." All I did was smile and smile and smile. After the security check, she looked at her mother and saw that she looked extremely pale and tired, and looked just like a late winter's moon, foggy, hazy, and obscure, devoid of the sheen. Similarly, mother's face had lost all the glory and charm of youthful days, and looked similar to the winter's moon. The poet felt the pangs of childhood, the familiar pain of separation, but she hides her true feelings in pretends cheerfulness to bid her good-bye by saying, "See you soon, Amma," and smiles away, ending the poem on a positive note. The poet realizes that everyone has to go through this phase of life and comes to terms with death, which is a reality, and understands that one should accept old age and nobody can escape from it. The tone of the poem is sad, melancholic, fearful, and emotional. Let us have a look at the form and the style of the poem. First and the foremost is that it is written in free verse, which means the lines of the poem are of unequal length and there is no regular rhyming pattern. Similarly, we can find that enjambment is used here, which actually creates a free flowing poem with a single chain of thought. Stream of consciousness technique is used here, which is actually a narrative style to depict the flow of thought and feelings that pass through the mind of the narrator. We also see ellipses used in the last lines of the poem, which is actually a narrative device when words are omitted, allowing the readers to draw their own conclusion. We have the last line written, "Smile and smile and smile," followed by a few dots, which actually allows the reader to draw their own conclusion. Let's have a look at the rest of the poetic devices that are used. Simile. Simile is a direct comparison with the use of like or as. Example, her face ashen like that of a corpse. Wan, pale, like a late winter's moon. So here you have the face ashen. Face is being compared to that of a corpse or a dead body. Similarly, the pale face of the mother is being compared to a late winter's moon. Next, we have the poetic device that is used is alliteration. The occurrence of a similar sounding letter or word in the adjacent or closely connected words is known as alliteration. Example, the ma sound in my mother, sir sound in 66, sir sound in smile and smile and smile. We also see symbolism and imagery also being used here. Use of symbolic images to represent or express ideas. It's been used inside this poem. For example, trees springing, children spilling, late winter's moon. All these are symbolisms and imageries. You can find that the late winter's moon is symbolically representing mother's old age and how she has lost her youthfulness and is reflecting a very pale and hazy look. Repetition is also used here. That is the use of same words repeatedly for effect, like smile and smile and smile. Now, another device that the poet has used is contrast. Now we can see there's an explicit or implicit difference between two things which are compared, that is a contrast. For example, the ambience inside the car is contrasted to the scene outside the window. Similarly, the old mother is contrasted with youthfulness. The melancholic heart of the poet is contrasted with her smiling face. The next poetic device is personification, that is, attribution of human characteristics to things. Example, trees sprinting. Similarly, we have tautology, that is a repetition of words with similar meaning. We have van, pale, both meaning the same. It's got the same meaning. It's repeated in sequence. Van and pale, they're mentioned together. Though the poem starts on a melancholic note, we see by the end of the poem the poet coming to terms with the fact that aging and death are inevitable to everybody. Let's have a look at the short answer questions. Why does the poet look at the trees and children? The poet is sad seeing the state her mother is in. To distract her mind from the unhappy thoughts looming large in her mind, she tries to find some solace by looking out of the window. The trees and the children give her a feeling that this is the cycle of life. At one end it fades while on the other it grows. The freshness of life she witnessed out of the window helped to uplift her mood. Let's have a look at the second question. What is the childhood fear the poet is talking about? The poem captures the poet's concern and realization of the mother's mortality as they embark on their journey. She realizes that her mother will grow old and weak, and one day she will lose her to death. The posture in which she sat in the car and her colorless, pale face added to her fears. Imagery was an effective literary device to bring out the contrast between the merry children and mother. Comment. The poet uses visual imagery to paint a vivid picture. It creates a vibrant and lively image that signifies youth and vitality. In contrast, the imagery emphasizes her aging and vulnerability. The word merry children brings to our mind sounds of laughter and shouting. The contrast in the imagery accentuates the vivacity of the children against the mother, who is presented in a subdued state. Similarly, the image of merry children spilling brings in a powerful contrast with the mother who is sitting in a car, suggestive of her limited mobility and restriction. Fourth question, why has the poet referred her mother to a late winter's moon? Arriving at the airport, she looks at her mother, who is standing far away. She realizes that her mother seems so vulnerable and weak. She looked very pale. She compares her mother to the image of a late winter's moon to bring out the extent of the loss of youthfulness and the glory associated with it. She's like a moon in the late winter season that is hazy and lacks luster. My parents' home. Was the poet possessive in her thought? If so, why? The possessive thought about my parents' home in the poem highlights the emotional connection between the protectiveness and sentimentality towards the parents and the place. It reverberates on her attachment and the desire to hold on to her memories and emotional significance associated with her ancestral home. Let's have a look at the long answer question. The poet in My Mother at 66 does not directly mention the fear of her mother's death, yet she is successfully able to convey the same through different poetic techniques. Discuss. The poet does not explicitly state that she is traumatized by the fear of her mother's death. Using various poetic techniques, the poet effectively conveys a sense of fear and mortality surrounding her mother and utilizes contrasting imagery to evoke a sense of vulnerability and mortality. The description of her mother's face as pale suggests the physical signs of aging and frailty. The car ride is metaphorically representing the poet's emotional journey as well as the realization of her mother's journey towards death. The tone and the mood are somber and reflective. The poet employs contrast to emphasize the fear of mortality. The poet's choice of language and diction contributes to the conveyance of fear. Words such as pale, corpse, and window's moon carry emotional weight and evoke a sense of fragility and mortality. These carefully chosen words, combined with the poet's skillful arrangement, create an atmosphere of apprehension and unease. Thus, the poetic devices create an atmosphere permeated with a sense of fear and apprehension surrounding the inevitable reality of death. Second question, comment on the tone of the poem with reference to my mother at 66. The tone of my mother at 66 is of introspection, contemplation, and a mix of tender concern and acceptance. It reflects a deep emotional connection to her mother and an awareness of the transitoriness of life. The poet's tone carries a sense of concern for her mother's aging and vulnerability. In the journey by car to the airport, she observes her mother's physical fragility and expresses a deep sense of empathy. The tone of the poem also exhibits a contemplative and reflective quality as she contemplates the changes in her mother's appearance and behavior. The tone of contemplation adds depth and introspection to the poem. In the last few lines of the poem, we can witness an underlying tone of acceptance and resignation. The poet acknowledges the inevitability of aging and passage of time. The combination of concern, contemplation, and acceptance creates a poignant tone in the poem. Third question. Through the thoughts of the poet, how does the poem complete a full cycle? In My Mother at 66, the poem completes a full cycle by exploring the themes of life, death, and the passage of time through the thoughts and emotions of the poet. The poem begins with the poet describing her mother, who is 66 years old, sitting beside her in a car. The journey to the airport serves as a metaphor for the journey of life. By observing her pale face and her aged look, she understands her physical and emotional vulnerability. She realizes that sooner or later death could separate her from her mother. The poet holds a deep reverence and love for her and wants to protect her from her own anxieties. She also contemplates the changing dynamics of their relationship as her mother grows older, and the poet becomes more aware of her own mortality as well. The poet acknowledges that aging is a natural process and with death an eventual separation is inevitable. She accepts the passage of time and resigns herself to the fact that life moves on and individuals must confront the transient nature of existence. The poem concludes by circling back to the present moment where the poet and her mother reach their destination. Journey serves as a metaphorical representation of the cycle of life with its beginning and endings. The poem comes full circle as the poet contemplates the fleeting nature of life and the profound impact of her mother's aging on her own understanding of mortality. Thank you.